Welcome to Season 4 of the Get Out of Teaching podcast presented by Larksong Enterprises. This podcast is for teachers who are considering leaving education but feel like they have no options. I'm your host, Elizabeth Diakos. I'm a career transition coach who guides overwhelmed teachers through a 5-step process out of education and into a life they love. I'd like to see a world where the work of teachers is valued and respected, and that teachers have a career pathway that enables them to continue to offer value to society beyond their work in the classroom. So in this season, we'll be speaking to other experts who help people to change careers, as well as a few ex-teachers who've forged a pathway into something new. So come along for the ride as we get out of teaching. Episode 6. Hi everyone and welcome to the show. And on today's show, I've got Petra Zink, who hails from Brisbane. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, Petra.
Thanks so much for having me.
So Petra, tell us a little bit about what you do, because when I put out the call for people who could perhaps help teachers as they make that transition into something new, what's your industry? Where do you sort of fit in that space?
So I'm a personal brand and digital strategist. In layman's term, what it means is I work mainly with corporate professionals on clarifying what their point of difference is, communicate that online and offline so that they can commercialize it. Which means how can you build and monetize your brand, no matter your background, your education, your experience? Because looking at the bigger picture of the future of work, where we have to go through not only more jobs, but more careers, it doesn't just come down to what kind of qualifications and hard skills you've got. It's about the ability to connect the dots from your background and make your next step bigger and better and be able to tell a story to diverse decision makers, because we have to change more frequently. So we're also facing different people. And how can we land opportunities is by communicating in a way that resonates with them. And this is what I'm doing today.
Okay, so that's quite a mouthful. Like, what does it look like day to day? Like, what does a day in the life of Petra look like?
So I'm a massive introvert, so I need to have a lot of me time and non-client facing activities and days. So I have 3 client facing activities or client days where I do my one-on-one coaching calls, where I run workshops and masterclasses, where I do podcast interviews for my own podcast and then going on to other people's podcasts. And then another 2 days are completely solo days, which means I do a lot of content creation for my social profile, but then also for my clients' profiles, because there's a lot of back end work that goes in. Also, team meetings, and then also strategizing. How can we build better programs, offer services that support our clients? It might be, we run monthly content creation workshops because that's something that people feel very comfortable with, how they can put themselves out there without sounding sleazy and salesy, especially when you don't come from an entrepreneurial background and are more in a corporate space. So we create a lot of content there. And I also write my book. So that's my new little activity that keeps me sane and busy.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And what are you writing at the moment?
So the book is going to be called Your Brand, Your Future, which means you need to position yourself in a way that you create your own opportunities. You don't need to chase them anymore when you put yourself out there in a way that you actually want to be seen as an associated with. And with that, you determine your future. So whatever you do today or not determines the outcome of tomorrow.
Yes, so true. And yet, we ignore that, don't we? We think that it'll pan out and we say, oh, my future self will deal with that situation. But you are your future self. So you still need to take action in the present. Okay, so let's imagine I'm going to create a character named, let's say, Donna. I don't think I have ever had a client named Donna, so there's no crossover there. I'm going to create an imaginary client named Donna who's in her late 40s or early 50s. Let's say she's 52. And Donna has woken up one morning and decided she wants to get out of teaching. She thinks she's got no options. She doesn't know what to do next. But what she does realize is that she needs to start creating that brand story that you're talking about. And if she wants to get out of teaching, she's going to have to be attracting or being appealing to a different audience to what she has in the past. So up until now, she's been dealing with stakeholders like her students, the other teachers, maybe the Department of Education, her boss in the school, the principal, and the parents. And now she's looking at dealing with a whole different group of people as she navigates moving into the world of probably corporate, hopefully, and trying to land a job that where the pay might be close to what she's been earning, even though she's going to go in as a novice. Tell me what she needs to do.
Oh, I love this. Poor Donna, but also exciting for Donna because the world is her oyster.
Yes.
But it all starts with a couple of things. So firstly, we look at values, which means what are the traits, the characteristics that you want to be known for? Because it's an easy task to start with. You have a list of words and see, this is exactly what I would associate myself with. This is exactly how I would describe myself. And this is one part of branding, but branding is also what other people say about you. And you can very much influence how they perceive you. And ideally, you also then want to give the same worksheet with those attributes to a group of trusted people, but it should be diverse people. So friends or family, of course, partner, but then also peers, bosses, previous clients, anyone who has also seen you in different environments, because we want to get a really holistic view of what others associate with you already. So this is a good starting point to just see, are there gaps? Am I perceiving myself differently to what others perceive myself as, or is it quite aligned? And then also identifying what is it that I want to hone in on? What are those 3 or 4 characteristics that I really want to stand for? Because this is what I then can live out loud, what I always say, in terms of the marketing of it. So what are the actions associated with those values? I want to be seen as the most reliable person, for example. Well, I need to show up not only on time, but 15 minutes earlier. I'm proactive before anyone else tells me to. So I can actually put tactical activities that I have to show every single day towards those values. And it also already opens up some more opportunities that we often don't identify. Now, the second step that I would always then do is a couple of tests. So brand archetype test, and I explain in a second what it is, and more so the personality test. So for those who have never come across brand archetypes, basically it is a representation of human traits. And Carl Jung has identified that there are 12 different personalities, and we can identify ourselves with some of them. I always say it's your DNA. You can't change it. But that helps us to identify, why are you drawn to certain people and tasks and environment and careers, and why sometimes it just feels hard. No matter how long you do it, it just feels like a lifetime. Some people you just get on fire, and with others you just don't resonate. It's because of the value alignment or misalignment. So it also supports what we did in the first exercise, the value assessment, but it helps us to put some language behind what we think and feel and how we act. And, for example, I didn't realize that my strength is seeing what others can't see. So I progressed in my career very quickly because I was looking after brand and product development. I developed over 55 new products from scratch. It was always easy for me to see. My last role in marketing was all about stakeholder management, looking after 18 boards, budget, training. And I felt totally exhausted every single day. Everything felt hard. And I lost also confidence, because no matter how hard I tried, I never felt I did any, not even good work, leave alone great work. Whereas the first 10 years, I just progressed so quickly. So this is what's also called Peter principle. You progress until you fail. And if you haven't never been exposed to personal development and to that side of career progression, you can lose confidence in yourself. And as much as we buy into people's competence, we buy more so into confidence. And if they don't have it, that they would say, I'm the best person for whatever I want to do, nobody else will see it either.
Yeah, wow. That's amazing. So tell me, the Carl Jung, that work, is there a personality test or one of those, which one are you talking about? Is there one in particular that you're referring to when you talk about that? The 12?
Yeah. So there are many, many free tests out there. So if you just Google brand archetype tests, you will come across a range of them. Okay. And it's been known and applied more so in the marketing space for business brands. But because, I've explored it when I was still in marketing, but then applied it to people. And in the end, if you want to build a career by yourself and with yourself, you need to treat yourself like a business. So how do I want to be perceived? What do I want to be known for? And how can I use this strength to my advantage? How can I add value and benefit to others? And all of a sudden, because you also mentioned often teachers, or when we are in a profession for so long, we don't see that we've got other opportunities. There's a lack of perspective. However, if we put different words towards it, we want to read between the lines and say, a magician, this is my archetype, for example. I'm great with product development because it's coming up with something from scratch. But how I use it now, because I've lost my interest to do it for products, I love people. So I'm coming up with helping others to see what they can't see for their own career. So this is very much a transferable skill. And this is exactly what we need to identify. How can we transition? How can we use what we've got in a different industry for us? And then how can we back it up our claim? Not just saying I'm the best at doing whatever it might be. It's because of... and there comes the results.
Yeah. So just to go back, you just broke up for a second. You said that your personality type was something, and I missed that.
Magician. Yes.
Okay.
So, for example, Apple is also a magician. They think differently. They help us to identify ourselves with a world that's not there yet. They're challenging the status quo. And, even in my corporate career now, looking back, I've always pushed the boundaries. I was never the star employee because I've always questioned things.
Yeah, I think that might be where I got into trouble in education too. I would always say, "Oh, you sure we can't try this? Are you sure we can't import this directly from the importer? Do we need to buy it from a supplier?" And I was always asking difficult questions that, made people annoyed with me.
But in the end, exactly. But, if you want to solve a problem, you can't look at it with the same mindset that created it. So having those difficult conversations and asking those tough questions is exactly what moves the needle. But because most people and also companies want to stay in the safety zone, they just blocked it out and pretended it never happened and shut down people who actually think differently. Now in your profession, this is exactly what people are coming to you for. Ask me those tough questions that I can finally uncover my blind spots. And yes, it feels uncomfortable and totally out of my water, but you know what? This is exactly what gets me to my next stage.
Oh, thanks. I feel good about that now. All those difficult conversations I had back then, they're all paying off now. Okay, so
exactly.
So if going back to Donna, she's decided she wants to move into some kind of corporate role where she's maybe a lot of the teachers I talk to, they have two goals, maybe three. They want to run a bookshop. This is their like fantasy job, right? They want to run a bookshop. They want to get a job at like packing shelves in a supermarket where they don't have to think and they don't have to talk to anyone, like at night, where they can just do the job and go home and know that it's been done and they don't have to do any homework. That's a big thing. And then there's the other ones who think they want to work in a nice office. Maybe there's coffee there. Maybe they can go to the toilet whenever they like. That's a big, exciting thing for a teacher. And maybe they get to dress up a little bit and not get covered in paint or glue or vomit or whatever. So there are sort of the three. These are the conversations I have quite a lot. So I think they're the three fantasies maybe that teachers have. So let's say that Donna wants to go into the corporate space. What would she need to do to move from education where she's got great people skills? She's actually pretty well over a lot of different technological like platforms and devices. So she's quite adept in that technology space. And she's a great, communicator. She can read a room. She's got really good sort of social intelligence. What would she need to do to brand herself to move into a corporate environment?
Well, it's coming down to identifying what it is that I'm attracted with this environment. So you also said stacking shelves, for example, which means that what is it that I really enjoy about it? It could be being autonomous, being in a quiet room, being independent, being in control. because these are the words that I want to use in my marketing, which means my resume, my LinkedIn profile, that it resonates with those who make the decision. Yeah. So when they see already similarities to what they're looking for in terms of the traits, and then all of a sudden they get a resume that's like the answer to what they're looking for, it's already a step forward. Mm-hmm. And then a big skill set here is also the storytelling component, meaning how can I make sense out of my 20 years experience in teaching to now being a secretary or to go into technology or stacking shelves, because it doesn't make sense on paper. Mm-hmm. Simply using language like having worked in education, making the complex simple, and supporting a diverse range of students to be and do their best. I've realized that blah, blah, blah. And this is where we move forward, because so many make the mistake to build their resume and their LinkedIn profile based on what they've done and what they're doing now, not what they want to do next. And if you're not connecting the dots and actually spell it out what you want to do next and what attracts you or what got you in there, people won't understand it either. Yeah. So it could be a personal experience. For example, a friend or a family member was sick, and you've experienced how good the healthcare system is. And this is what got you really fascinated. And this is what wants you to get into it. Mm. So all of a sudden there's a connection. People are like, makes sense. And they're not questioning any further. Yeah. I have a client actually who is training to become a radiographer because she had breast cancer and wanted to, she loved the way they treated her, and she loved the environment as well. Like, it was this calm, very sort of safe, nurturing environment. And she'd come out of education, which can be a more dynamic, kind of chaotic, potentially environment and noisy. And so she went into this beautiful, calm, safe space. And it really just, I don't know, it sort of appealed to her, in a kind of heart way, that this is a place that I could feel really nurtured as an employee. And so she's retraining to be a radiographer now, and, working on the next step so that she can move into that field, based on totally on her personal experience of being a patient. So, I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about. That's a great example. Thank you. I'm just thinking, so going back to Donna, say she, and I, by the way, I really love the bit you said about autonomy. I think that is such a big, important issue. So many teachers I talk to say how they don't, they feel like they have no agency over their career path, that other people dictate the way they move forward in their career, or even what year level they teach, that kind of thing. But also that their days are so structured, they don't have that autonomy. And so exactly what you're saying, if you're stacking shelves, you get to decide, do I start at the top or the bottom or whatever? I don't know what decisions you have to make in that role. I'm sure there are others, but you get to make those decisions. Whereas often in education, I've heard of teachers being told that the principal said, if I walk from one grade 5 room to the next, the second teacher should be finishing the sentence of the first teacher. That's how tightly they want the classrooms to run. I know, it's scary. So obviously that's not an autonomous environment, and there's no agency either in the environment for the teacher. So Donna's going to move into the corporate space. What about the look? So a lot of teachers will wear sort of smart casual. You don't want to get too dressed up because you never know what you're going to have to do in a day. You could be out gardening, you could be playing sport. There's, you could be using paint or glue or standing on a ladder, or, there's 100 different things you might have to do as a teacher. So you don't tend to wear that sort of corporate clothing. How important is what you wear when you're going into that next phase where you're moving into some corporate sort of environment? It is a big part of branding, because we make our perception about somebody and make up our mind about somebody in a second we see them, online and offline. And we already have a preconceived opinion, whether we like them or not, based on how they look, what kind of colors they wear. So this is what I call the marketing of your brand. How do you actually make it visible and also verbal for people what you're all about? Now, it comes back to your values again. If you say, I'm smart casual, I'm more the free spirit, I don't want to get into a suit and tie all the time either, then this is also what comes down to searching the right companies and also portraying ourselves the package they would get. So, for example, one of my clients, he's a PhD and he was buttoned up and, had the tie on. And when I met him in person, honestly, I thought it's going to be a tough conversation, quite boring, to be honest. I had already all the perception and the expectations in my head. Now, when I met him, the most laid-back dude you could ever meet, with the skateboard, a t-shirt. He said he hasn't worn a suit and tie in years. I was like, what is this here? But, this is actually, I mean, in this case, it was a positive impact. But at the same time, if I would have been a corporate client in the Big Four, I would have probably been disappointed that I don't see the PhD dressed up, because this is the corporate and environment that I'm in. So it's all about, how do you actually want to be perceived, and what can they expect every day? Especially, when you get to an interview stage, you want to dress a little bit up compared to what you would wear in a day-to-day environment. But it starts with actually looking for those companies and also doing a bit research. What is the standard dress code? Can we reach out to somebody and say, what are you wearing every day? It's simple as that. And this is, the power of social media these days. We see so much more behind the scenes. We have the opportunity to ask a peer who would do a similar job, what is it like to work in this company? Are you working from home? Do you have a dress code? Do we have to, wear a certain uniform? What is it like to be there? It's not just about thinking about it. It's literally getting your hands dirty and doing some research and digging.
And I guess to actually thinking about companies that you might admire and seeing what their work culture looks like. So I have a client who's really interested in a not-for-profit big organization in the US that has a really lovely interface with the public. And she's been connecting with the people who work there on LinkedIn. And I guess she's going to start, having those conversations. So it's a really great opportunity just to get the inside knowledge and to begin to establish yourself in that environment before you even apply for a job.
Exactly. And also just having a look at the industry specifics. Law, for example, it's all about credibility. It's a little, I would feel weird if somebody rocks up with a spaghetti top and thongs, if they would be my lawyer.
Yeah.
It might be the best lawyer in this world, but it would be a little bit off-putting. Whereas somebody who dressed the part in that profession, this is what I would expect. In a non-for-profit, different world, it's all for others. They're giving so others can benefit. I don't need to have an Armani suit to be seen as respectful. It's actually doing the opposite of it. So also applying some common sense. What is the industry specific for it? And am I identifying with it? Could I wear suit and tie all day? I couldn't anymore. But do I have to? I don't.
Yeah, wow, that's really helpful. And I love that example of the not-for-profit, because you're right. If they wear those clothes and drive a Mercedes-Benz or something, they're actually undermining the message that they're supposed to be sending by doing that. Yeah, really interesting. Okay, so Donna is about to apply for a position. What does she need to do next? Like, what does she need to do? Maybe she's got herself an interview. So her resume is looking good. She's been able to identify those things that you're talking about, her skill set, her personality traits that lead her to be able to explain her experience and the way that's impacted on the environment that she was in. She gets into the interview. Then what? What happens next?
It's about researching, coming prepared. It's the same as going into a classroom. What is the company all about? Did they get any awards recently? Were they acquired? Did they put out a great campaign? Whatever it might be, that I have some talking points that I can initiate, but also asking questions. Those who ask questions lead the conversation. Mm-hmm. And when a decision maker sees they've actually done the groundwork and went above and beyond somebody else, well, guess what? The perception is about they're proactive. I don't have to tell them what they need to do. I can rely on them. They are dedicated, they're committed to it, and they're genuinely interested. And they don't just take one interview after the next to get into any job to start with. And, this is a great way to also show some respect, saying, I've seen you've just won this award. What an incredible work you've done with so-and-so. I would be interested. What's the plan for the rest of 2021? Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden you can also see, am I aligned with where they are going? Do they know their vision?
Yes.
Then also, what are the resources that you put towards achieving them? Or is it expected that I just carry the workload of 8 people and unrealistic expectations? So it's also being mindful about the questions you ask based on the outcomes you want to achieve.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I was just, as you were talking about that, going into an interview and guiding the interview, it took me back in time. As I was trying to leave, I wanted to, just thought I'll try another school. Maybe that will help, you know. And I applied for a job, and I got to the school, and they said, right, come in here, sit down. Here's a piece of paper with like 10 questions on it. Make some notes. We'll be back in 20 minutes. And then they left me in the empty room with, you know, no, would you like a drink of water, or the bathroom's down the hallway, or anything, just left me there. And I felt, and, you know, I was an experienced teacher, and I knew what I was doing and everything, but I still felt so intimidated by that behavior. I just thought, even if I get this job, I don't really want it, you know, like, why I should have, if I'd been truly authentic in that moment, I would have just left then, because the interview was excruciating, because they just rattled through their questions, and I didn't really have an opportunity to kind of do anything else and lead, like you said, lead it. But it was just such an unpleasant experience too. And I had a few like that. So they actually, that's like they're trying to create a level playing field by creating that environment for all the candidates. But it actually is so counterproductive, because it puts people in this really kind of tense state, and then you don't perform at your best in the interview. So I wonder, I don't know, maybe that only happens in education. What's your experience of that?
Not at all. It is as much as the candidate also interviews the company. Is it aligned with my values? And this is where we go back to exercise 1. I want to be autonomous. I want to have flexibility. I want so and so and so. If I don't see those traits already, especially in the first few context points, exactly, I'm running as quickly as I possibly can, because if it's not beautiful and amazing in the honeymoon phase, well, guess what? In a year, it's going to be even worse. The company doesn't get any better.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it was an excellent decision in hindsight. Well, I mean, I didn't get the job anyway, but even if I had, I think, it would have been a good one to walk away from. Okay. So let's, we've started the job. Maybe we don't really like it that much. And we think, so Donna's, been there for 3 months, and she thinks, oh boy, maybe this wasn't a good idea. Maybe I should just go back to teaching, because at least I know what that is. Or maybe I should look at something else. How did she explain this little 3-month, time and space where she was in a job that she wasn't a good fit in the end? How do you put that on your resume?
Yeah, I would actually take a step backwards and I think, what is it that I don't like about it? Because maybe it's something you could address in a conversation, in an informal conversation, and say, I have to always work late, and I have to pick up my kids. So maybe there's a way how to work around that. It's not always the task. It's not always the environment. Sometimes it's the situation that is not as suitable. And also coming from 10, 20, whatever plus years experience from one industry and one setup, it's hard to adjust to something new. And there is the book, The Wisdom of Transition, How to Navigate Change at Work. And Cheryl Benedict, she wrote the book. She talks about the stages of transition. And the first stage after we've made the change is actually acceptance. It's not liking it, it's acceptance. And it takes us a while to see, okay, this is how it works. These are the people, these are the tasks that I'm doing. How can I take ownership here? I wanted to have agency. Now, what can I do to actually drive it in a way that is aligned with what I want? And so many struggle with it because they are not able to articulate it. And this is also when they say, I want to stack shelves. It's not the shelves stacking that actually interests them. It's about, I can do whatever I want. I don't have to talk to anyone. This is the underlying motivation. If I know that, I all of a sudden have so many more opportunities rather than just those 3 that are, that come to my mind. How, if for whatever reason it still doesn't work out, we want to be open with this. Having thought that, having always dreamt to work in a corner office, it wasn't until I've experienced that I didn't like it, but I'd rather fail experiencing it than just thinking about it or something like it. Literally calling it out that I needed to experience it firsthand, because you can't outthink those kind of goals.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So is that true? Did you actually not like the corner office?
I hated it.
I'm curious, because I think that is another goal that a lot of people have. What was wrong with the corner office? Tell us.
The corner office was a nice one, but the people and the task and the environment was very toxic. So all the shiny superficial aspects of my role were amazing, and everyone's like, how would you want to quit? Nobody gets into that so quickly like you did. And I was like, I just want to get out. It burns me out. Sunday afternoon, stomach turns upside down, sweaty nights, going to work, I was already ventilating. Like, this is not what life should look like, is it? So it wasn't the office as such. It was, but again, it was identify. Now hindsight, I should have identified that the tasks were not aligned with my personality, and I had to be I'm not sure if I can swear this, but a bitch to be successful in this role. Whereas the first 10 years where I could be myself, I could be bubbly, I could be a little bit quirky, and this is what got me there. And all of a sudden I had to be somebody else to be successful in the role. And you can do it for so long until you're like, you know what, it's too hard, it's too exhausting to trying to be somebody you're not. And this is also the power of personal branding. It's not changing who you are, it's elevating who you are already and being more mindful and intentional in what kind of situations and environments you place yourself in, because you know exactly what your strengths are and also your weaknesses, and who do you need to be surrounded by who can complement what you can bring to the table, that you can create a bigger impact, rather than just trying to fight against a wall and it just never moves anywhere.
Wow, so profound. Again, you've taken me back in time to my last sort of full-time teaching role, where I was running a music program after school, and we were charging the students for it, but the money was going back into the arts budget so that we could buy more equipment for the whole school. And then, unrelated to anything that we did, there was an edict from the department that you were no longer allowed to do that. You had to, if you took money from a student, like if they paid for something, the money or the benefit had to go directly back to only that student, right? So it wasn't allowed, the money wasn't allowed to be spread out among all the students. So we were doing it for free. We weren't being paid extra to do this after school program. And so really the money was technically ours, you know, as individuals, the teachers, because we were running this thing after school. But it was all on the school grounds, and, you know, and we just donated it back to the school. But they wouldn't let us do that anymore. And honestly, that for me, and I loved doing it. I love the kids. I love their families. That little part of my world was one of the greatest joys of my teaching career. And it just sucked all the joy out of it when I couldn't have this added benefit of it gets to benefit the whole art program, because I was running the budget as well. And so it actually, which I hated doing the budget because it's not my thing. But I love that I could bring more money into the budget and then have a bit more freedom with how we use the budget, so that it actually enabled us to have more freedom. And so, yeah, I just, I mean, if I hadn't left, I would have stopped doing it anyway, because it just, all the fun had gone out of it. You know, I was so excited about being able to, you know, boost the budget. We were boosting it by 20%. That was significant, you know. And so, anyway, yeah. So I totally get what you're saying about that. For me, the alignment there was I got to have that autonomy and that creativity of like, how can I bring more money in somehow, you know, and we worked out a way to do it. And then they stopped us and we're like, no, stop stopping us doing all these fun things that we're doing. So yeah, I totally get that. And I think a lot of teachers would really resonate with there are a lot. I have a Facebook group with, it's just tipped over 5,000 members, and a lot of them are art teachers, because I'm in all the art teacher groups. So I'm attracting them. And I think they're creative people, and then they get into a role where that's kind of forced out of them, because they've got to toe the line and be very structured in the way they run their classes and whatever. And that's why they're not aligned with it anymore, because even though they've come in as a creative and they want to share their knowledge and their joy in what they create, actually the profession doesn't really allow for that. And so then they want to get out because there's that lack of alignment. So I think you make a really excellent point, very insightful. Thank you. So Petra, before we wrap this up, I've got a couple more questions. First one is, what's your favourite song?
Burn Your Name by Powderfinger.
So what is it about that song by Powderfinger that really resonates with you?
I think it's more the rhythm. It's very upbeat. It builds up and then it makes you feel good.
Okay. So it's like motivating.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we'll have to put the link to that in our show notes so people can listen to your favorite song. And finally, is there anything else you'd like to add that if someone was wanting to transition out of one career into another, they need to be thinking about before they go ahead and do that?
Yeah, probably a couple of things, actually. I'm a big fan of building a portfolio career, meaning you've got not one full-time engagement, but you've got multiple fingers in your different pots. So, I've got 2 different companies that I'm running, but I also teach at universities as I always call it my paid hobby, because I do get paid for it, but I would also do it if I wouldn't. Don't tell anyone. But that also got me exposure to developing a few government-funded programs, for example, from employability for youth to last year with COVID, how can we create packages for small businesses that they can future-proof themselves? And it just puts me into different networks. And this is the other tip. So whilst identifying what are those transferable skills that I really want to hone in on, and where can I use them? How can I build diverse networks? Because we all have heard the term, your network is your net worth. And I always add, your diverse network is your next career or business opportunity, because you don't know who they are connected with and who their family is and whatever it might be, and who they can introduce you to or open doors. And especially these days, I was also in recruitment after marketing. So I'm onto my 3.5 pivot because I'm in the midst of one or towards the end already, but get excited about that. And those opportunities have only come through people who could open doors for me or could introduce me to somebody else. So you want to build the roof before it's raining. So ideally, not just when you already resigned, then start doing the work, because you build a brand over a lifetime. It never stops. But it also takes some time to get some traction. Just putting yourself out there for a couple of times, then saying, oh, it doesn't get any results is not enough. It's very much the consistency and the persistence, showing up also when we don't feel like it, connecting people with each other, being proactive with reaching out, and don't wait for people to come to you because it doesn't happen. So how can you get active straight away? Who do you know already in your network that you can reconnect with? Maybe from school 10 years ago, see what they're doing now. Even just starting with an informal interview tour. I see you working at company so-and-so. I see you are in this industry now. What is it like to be there? So rather than having a hard sales call saying, I want to work for you, or how can I apply for this job? How can I build a relationship first? And I could literally by asking, what's it like to work there? Would you recommend it? I'm considering getting into this industry, a professional company. So it doesn't mean I'm just considering it.
Yes.
So in the second we ask for advice, we also put them on a pedestal, and people usually love to help. Yes. And rather than just saying, hey, I need a job. Can you hire me? It's like, go away. It's like this car sales example. It's like, nah, I'm good. So nobody wants to be sold to, but everyone wants to buy. And if I know that you're looking for something and you share your goals, it's more likely that I think of you, saying, oh, I was just speaking to Elizabeth. She's actually looking for, facilitating workshops. I should introduce you to each other. Yeah. So all of a sudden you come up in conversations outside your own control, but because you've done the groundwork.
Yeah, that's such good advice. You made me. I just sent someone a job that came up on LinkedIn that I just know is right up his alley, and he's like, "Oh, thanks for thinking of me," and I'm like, "Well, because it was little effort for me to do that." So Adam Grant talks about in Give and Take, his book, he talks about like the 5-minute favor, or that idea of if it's only going to take me 5 minutes, I'll probably be willing to do it for you, if it's a small task. And so people are actually quite willing usually to connect people or help them, take that next step. If it's not a big, drain on their time and effort, they're usually quite happy to do that. And also I think you're right, people love to be seen as the expert or seen as someone with influence. And so they'll go to extra effort in order to maintain that reputation. So, then it actually can be really helpful to be well connected. That's such good advice. Thank you. All right. So we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming on the Get Out of Teaching podcast today, Petra. It's been an amazing experience, and I'm very grateful to you for sharing your insight and your wisdom.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And honestly, I love your mission, because more people and teachers need to be empowered to see there is more to their career. And just because they've done it for so long doesn't mean they have to do it moving forward. In the future of work, we have more careers and not just jobs. So embrace it now and be proactive and create your own momentum rather than trying to wait or chasing opportunities. It's never easy. So keep on the great work and keep inspiring everyone.
Thank you. You've been listening to the Get Out of Teaching podcast, presented by Larksong Enterprises, with your host, Elizabeth Diakos. Do you know someone else who could benefit from hearing more stories of hope and transition from teachers all around the world? Please take a moment to share this and other episodes via your podcast app. Each share helps me reach listeners just like you who can benefit from this content. The Get Out of Teaching podcast is proud to be part of the Experts on Air podcast network. For show notes and other resources, please visit larksong.com.au/podcast.